Wu Minglu, Earth's best 16-year-old troublemaker, crashes through his school's glass windows to escape the furious students he just scammed. Earlier that day, a green-haired guy with a gadget that looks like a Geiger counter recorded Wu's latest win, leaving him at 99% power for an upgrade. He hopes his next target, Wu, is a decent person. Little does the idiot know what he has in store for him. Wu finally breaks free from his angry classmates, taunting them to eat his dust the next time they play so he can annoy them again and take their money. As they chase him, boiling with rage, Wu flashes a cheeky grin and wishes them luck catching him. However, Wu's joy is cut short when his homeroom teacher catches him outside and drags him to the office for a lecture. In the office, the teacher talks about the importance of morality, but as expected, Wu's mind is elsewhere. Although dubious most times, Wu is a brilliant student with grades that would make anyone jealous. It's just a shame he uses his smarts for mischief. After another stern warning, the teacher throws the morally drenched retard out of the office. Unfazed, Wu gets up and struts down the corridor like a final boss in those annoying video game ads. After school, Wu heads to his night job, where he manages to irritate a few customers, but somehow completes his shift without any serious incidents. Once done, he finally enjoys some time to himself. On his way home, he passes by the Platinum Tower, where all the VIPs dine, and dreamily vows to live there before he turns 30. Most people would scoff at such a dream given his attitude, but with plot armor and guts of steel, anything is possible in this story. While lost in his thoughts, Wu continues his walk home, unaware of the googly-eyed monsters drawn to his wicked energy. Suddenly, he hears someone call him the Wicked One, but when he looks back, no one is there. Bro turns around only to face the ugliest monster imaginable, a creature with a hookworm head and parasite-like limbs armed with organic blades, hungry for Wu. Just as the monster attacks, the green-haired guy from earlier appears and rescues Wu in the nick of time. The fight is so fast and intense that Wu initially thinks the green-haired guy is an enemy, but after showing off some impressive moves and energy blasts, the green-haired guy defeats the monster. He introduces himself as Lian N, an ombudsman tasked with correcting Wu's life. Lian N hands Wu the Geiger counter-like device, explaining it measures his wickedness. As Wu struggles to understand the gadget, more monsters begin to flood the area. Before fighting the monsters, Lian N explains that the device measures the wickedness of anyone who touches it. Green for normal humans, yellow for callous ones, and red for the truly wicked. The monsters attacking Wu are called karma monsters, feeding on wicked people to cleanse the city. The system of good and evil has already judged Wu, recognizing him as a talented but misguided individual. To correct his life before it's too late, they sent Lian N. Wu, bewildered by the absurdity of the situation, listens as Lian warns him to keep his wickedness in the green or yellow range. Anything beyond that will result in dire consequences. After Lian defeats the monsters, Wu thanks him and walks away as if nothing happened. Lian, exasperated, chases after him to discuss more. He finally catches up to Wu and pins him down in an abandoned warehouse. As they stir up the local sewer rats, Lian gets attacked, while Wu manages to escape to his dorm room. There, he counts his money and stashes it in his piggy bank, reveling in his hidden fortune. But just as things seem to be going his way, Wu is attacked by another wicked monster after his money. In a desperate move to save himself and his stash, Wu jumps out of his 8th floor window, landing in a dumpster. Lian, nearby and enjoying the show, watches as the monster corners Wu. He makes sure that Wu loses his precious piggy bank, forcing him to face the consequences of his actions. When things get too real for Wu, he chokes on his pride and begs Lian for help. Before stepping in, Lian makes sure Wu admits his wrongdoings. After watching the proud fraudster call himself an asshole, Lian finally decides to help. He quickly dispels the karma monsters and then faces their boss. This monster is stronger than ever, and Lian warns Wu to brace himself, as this fight will be terrifying. Wu, for once, thinks about others and suggests they move the battle to a non-residential area to avoid harming innocent people. Wu leads Lian to an abandoned building, ensuring the monsters follow. Once there, Wu points out the building's weak spots that can be attacked in a specific order to bring it down quickly. Lian takes note and sets the plan in motion, handing his Geiger counter to Wu. Wu speeds around, marking the weak spots and planting bombs. While placing the last bomb in a sewer, the building starts to collapse. Wu narrowly escapes, managing to prevent the entire building from falling on him and Lian. Sensing the danger, Lian rushes to find Wu, but he's already gone. As Lian searches for him, the building begins to collapse. Trapped under debris and construction site waste, Lian struggles to free himself. Meanwhile, a psychotic figure in strange clothes watches from just outside the city. Hearing the explosion, he calls his equally bizarre friends and urges them to follow him into the city. As the smoke clears out, Wu emerges unscathed and mocks Lian for being trapped in the debris. Just when he thinks things couldn't get any worse, Leon pops out of the rubble, shouting angrily. Wu, showing no remorse, tells Leon he doesn't care about the damage as long as he's having fun. To get back at him, Leon brings out his correctional puppet, cursing Wu with a Pinocchio-like spell. He tricks Wu into believing that his schlong will grow longer every time he lies. In a panic, Wu lies in front of Leon, causing not only his schlong but also his silvery white hair to grow longer. Leon laughs heartily, enjoying his revenge. Desperate, Wu asks how to stop the curse. Leon tells him he must get forgiveness from everyone he has wronged. That night, Wu has nightmares about his situation, but wakes up the next morning as if nothing happened. On the balcony, he finds Leon preparing breakfast. Confused, Wu asks why he's there. Leon explains he must stay within 100 meters of Wu at all times. He also shows Wu his precious piggy bank, which Wu grabs and hugs without thanking Leon. Ignoring Leon's warning about the distance limit, Wu runs out of the house to get to school. Karma hits hard, as Wu quickly learns the importance of listening to an ombudsman. Eventually, he returns home and begs Leon to accompany him to school, realizing he can't escape the consequences of his actions. At school, Wu endures a tedious history lesson from their meaty teacher, who lectures about dinosaurs and their 12-scale cities, before warning about an upcoming test and dismissing the class. Once class is over, Wu faces the toughest part of his day, seeking forgiveness from everyone he's wronged. He starts by helping carry items for people who usually avoid him. Along the way, he spots Leon standing near a window, mocking him. Annoyed, Wu asks what Leon is doing there, only to be trolled once more. Leon reveals that everyone will forget about him once Wu's correctional education is complete, leaving Wu shocked at the thought of forgetting Leon. The realization that he will forget Leon after his behavior is corrected makes Wu, for a moment, feel a twinge of sympathy. Leon, amused by Wu's reaction, laughs and brings Wu back to his usual self. Leon then accompanies Wu to apologize to the first set of people he's wronged. After pacifying their anger, Wu and Leon move on to the next group. In the corridor, they bump into the school supervisor, a strict woman. Seeing Wu, she questions his recent strange behavior and demands an explanation. Leon makes snide remarks, causing Wu to curse at him, forgetting that Leon is invisible to others. The supervisor, thinking Wu is cursing at her, asks uncomfortable questions, leading Wu to lie, which makes his hair and schlong grow longer. Don't ask what schlong is. Embarrassed, Wu runs away, trying to avoid becoming the new school clown. That night, Leon spends some time fighting more monsters. On the way home, Leon talks to Wu about the strongest karma monsters, mentioning that some appear human but are different inside. He warns that an ombudsman who fights one of these strong monsters is likely to die and be forgotten as a hero. Wu finds this hard to believe until Leon checks a wound he sustained earlier, realizing it's far from healed. Elsewhere, the psycho seen earlier approaches one of the city gates, kills the security guard, and breaks into the city to wreak havoc. Meanwhile, Wu finds a coin lying in the snow and picks it up, sharing his unrealistic dream of getting into the Platinum Tower with Leon. Leon frowns, telling him that the tower never allows people like him. Unfazed, Wu returns home, sips some water, and goes to sleep. Before drifting off, Leon ponders why the system considers Wu a criminal. In just a few days, Wu has apologized to most of the people he's wronged, and even made a place in his heart for Leon to live and troll him. Suddenly, Leon receives a notification on his counter. A high-ranking karma monster has invaded the city. Reports indicate the monster is destroying all the McDonald's shops it can find. Supervisors are ordered to terminate any clients who haven't completed their correctional programs, so they can focus on eradicating the monster. As supervisors begin terminating their clients without hesitation, Leon gears up, troubled by the thought of ending the life of the only client he's come to care for. Wu had captured Leon's heart when he stitched a tear in his clothes earlier. Leon reflects on his mentor's teachings and decides he can't kill Wu yet. Wu wakes up to find Leon holding a sword and breathing heavily above him. Thankfully, Leon has more pressing matters. Before he is forced to do the unthinkable, Leon drags Wu to the doorstep of his former homeroom teacher, the last person he needs to apologize to, in order to reduce his wickedness to the green zone. Leon tells Wu to work on pacifying his four-eyed teacher while he waits outside. Once Wu manages to get his wickedness into the green zone, the 100-meter limit between him and Leon is lifted, allowing Leon to escape for now. Still bewildered, Wu knocks on Teacher Wen's door. Teacher Wen, known for his tough demeanor, listens to Wu's plea and takes advantage of the situation by making Wu write a 5,000-word essay on how he plans to live a saintly life from now on. While Wu is busy with the essay, Leon lounges in the snow, talking to himself and playing with little snowmen he made out of boredom. Just as everything seems to be going smoothly, the psycho shows up, ready to battle Leon. Wu finishes his essay on time, but Teacher Wen tortures him further by demanding he rewrite it before accepting his apology. Meanwhile, Leon is increasingly frustrated by the psycho's antics. Eventually, Leon's temper snaps, leading to an all-out fight. As the battle progresses, Leon realizes the psycho is far more formidable than he initially thought. After exchanging a few hits and jabs, Leon comes to a shocking realization. Nothing seems to work against this laughing maniac, who's clearly just toying with him. After writing endless essays, Wu hears a commotion outside and goes to investigate. He finds Leon taking a severe beating from the psycho. Desperate, Wu pleads with Teacher Wen to show mercy and save Leon's life. However, the teacher, ever selfish, rants about how Wu has ruined his life, refusing to help. Frustrated by the teacher's indifference, Wu finally snaps and knocks him out cold. Wu then rushes downstairs to find Leon buried in the snow, barely alive. In a fit of rage, Wu stabs the psycho in the belly. The psycho, enraged by the attack, tosses Leon aside like a rag doll and turns his attention to Wu. Ready for a new challenge, the psycho prepares to face his latest foe. At checkpoint 7, a group of men in blue arrives late at a warehouse to investigate a crime scene. They're baffled by the level of destruction and wonder how such chaos was allowed in one of their key facilities. Upon entering the warehouse, they're horrified by the sight of rotting bodies and pools of blood. Realizing the severity of the situation, they prepare to report it to the marshals. However, before they can act, 3 clowns in grotesque priest-like costumes appear. Using their powers of compulsion, they force the helpless cops to lie to their superiors about the incident, ensuring the cover-up remains intact. Meanwhile, back with Wu, he's frantic after seeing Leon's severe condition. Ignoring the annoying yapper, Wu checks Leon's chest wound, relieved to find no slimy substances. However, Wu is puzzled by Leon's lack of breathing. The yapper approaches and explains Leon's true nature. He's not an ordinary human, but a puppet with a control system. A glowing box the yapper holds. This box houses and controls Leon's consciousness. Without it, Leon is essentially a lifeless doll. Despite the yapper's detailed explanation, Wu struggles to grasp the concept. All he knows is that the yapper is responsible for his friend's condition, and he's determined to get revenge. He demands the yapper hand over the cube. Surprisingly, the yapper complies, handing Wu the corrosive cube. As Wu holds the burning hot substance, the yapper continues to taunt him, marveling at how Wu endures the searing pain. As the yapper's chatter reaches a rapid pace, Wu, exasperated, slaps him until he gains some clarity. The yapper, now reflecting on his life, turns his back momentarily. When he looks again, he finds both Wu and Leon have vanished. Assuming it's a game of hide-and-seek, he summons his bizarre spider companion and starts searching the city for them. Wu, meanwhile, hides and uses a fragment of the karma monster to create a diversion, successfully throwing the yapper off track. As the yapper's search seems to be winding down, Wu leaps over a bridge and lands on a moving van's container, effectively escaping both the yapper and his spider. The yapper lands in the middle of the road, causing a traffic accident. Wu seizes the opportunity to carry Leon to an empty room, only to realize he's been careless, leaving a trail of blood that could lead the yapper back to them. True to his fears, the yapper soon returns and resumes the chase. In the meantime, Leon's other consciousness awakens in a limbo-like black world. As Wu hides on the rooftop with Leon, the yapper catches up and uses one of his mandibles to wound Wu's shoulder. During the commotion, the yapper gazes longingly at the Platinum Tower, dreaming of reaching it. Before he can act, Leon's other consciousness, revealed to be a very eccentric woman, takes over his body. She introduces herself as the last monitor of Leon's body and readies herself for action. Once a powerful being, Mai was betrayed and suppressed by her superiors to make room for Leon's control system. Now that the yapper has helped her remove Leon's control system, Mai is ready for her dramatic return. To repay the yapper, she deceives him into believing she wants to help him reach the Platinum Tower. The yapper, swayed by her apparent sincerity and her rejection of his previous arrogance, lowers his guard. Unbeknownst to the yapper, Mai is a master deceiver with no qualms about morality. When he least expects it, she slices off his right arm, revealing her true malevolent nature. Mai proceeds to beat the yapper mercilessly, pushing him to unleash his true self and engage seriously with his formidable opponent. Meanwhile, the 3 clowns from earlier, having noticed the commotion on the rooftop, rush to prevent further chaos. As Mai presses the yapper, she urges him to remember who she really is. Struggling to recall, the yapper eventually remembers Mai from his past, a figure who used to scold him for his selfishness and toy theft. Realizing who he's up against, the yapper fights with renewed determination, attempting to overcome Mai's relentless assault. During the chaos, Leon manages to escape with Wu, leaving the yapper to face the wrath of the clowns in their priestly garb. The clowns attempt to seal the yapper in a protective enclosure, but he evolves in response, summoning a karma monster to rescue him. His partner appears unexpectedly, joining the fray and fighting alongside him. After several minutes of intense running, Mia finally finds a secure spot for them to regroup. Wu, ever the clueless optimist, asks her why she's being so harsh, only for Mia to reveal that the clowns in priest costumes are powerless against the yapper. the situation is still dire, and the monster's threat remains. As Mia tends to Leon's wounded body, the control system's insertion starts reacting to the situation. Wu seizes the opportunity to compliment Mia, trying to make her blush by calling her cute. Mia, however, brushes off his flattery, focusing on the task at hand. She quickly reinserts the control system into Leon's chest, ensuring he can reclaim his body and return to his normal life. Before disappearing back into the spirit world, Mia gives Wu a final piece of advice. Continue being good to make Leon's life easier. She then dives into the spirit world, where she finds the Yapper's spirit and escorts him to his final resting place. A few days later, a wealthy and sinister man, who has come across a photo of Wu and the Karma monster, is amused. He instructs his butler to track down Wu for a meeting, hinting at more trouble ahead for our protagonist. While Leon lies unconscious in the hospital at District 3, Wu spends his days keeping watch over him. As Wu reflects on the chaotic events from a few nights ago, he's shocked to realize that no one else seems to know about them. A couple of days later, the retard grows increasingly anxious. Leon is still in a coma, and Wu's bank account is rapidly draining from the hospital bills. In a fit of frustration, Wu scares a mother and her child on the street before he pulls himself together and plots to make Leon pay him back for every penny he spent. Just as he's about to return to Leon's room, a black limo pulls up, and before Wu knows it, he's whisked away and shoved into the back seat. Inside, Wu finds himself bound and surrounded by two burly bodyguards. Despite his predicament, he tries to stay calm and negotiate his way out. One of the bodyguards threatens him with a gun, instructing him to stay quiet and listen to their boss. The boss turns out to be the butler of the wealthy man, who had previously wanted to speak with Wu. Wu is initially confused, but things start to make sense when the butler explains the role of ombudsman and their peculiarities. Wu starts to wonder if Leon is nearby, given the Geiger counter and the 100-meter rule. The butler reassures Wu that he will be kept safe, but doesn't provide many details. Left puzzled, Wu is told to be patient and wait for further instructions. After a few more minutes of driving, the limo pulls up to a massive mansion. Bro is stunned by the sheer opulence of the place. He asks the butler what's going on, and the butler explains that Wu is here to meet the mansion's owner for an important discussion. Trusting the butler, Wu follows him inside. At the mansion's entrance, Wu is greeted by a group of glamorous maids who are more than eager to cater to his every need. Forgetting about Leon for a moment, Wu decides to indulge himself and enjoy the luxury. Meanwhile, Leon's consciousness jolts awake, haunted by memories of the brutal moment when Yapper stabbed his chest. Realizing Wu has broken their 100-meter rule, Leon is furious and quickly gets out of bed to track down Wu and confront him. Back at the mansion, Wu finally meets the owner after a feast. The owner, a cheerful but clueless man who's clearly inherited his wealth, introduces himself as Ao Zi, the vice president of Ao Shi Enterprise. Ao Zi reveals that Wu looks exactly like his missing nephew and proposes a deal. Wu, unfamiliar with Ao Shi Enterprise, is baffled. He admits he doesn't even own a TV, so he's never heard of Ao Zi or his company. Ao Zi, choking on his tea in surprise, asks if Wu is serious. Wu casually replies that it makes sense he doesn't know Ao Zi if he hasn't seen any media about him. Ao Zi gets straight to the point and tells Wu that he wants him to pretend to be his missing nephew, so they can both inherit the Ao Shi family's fortune. This way, the wealth won't end up being donated to the public. Wu considers the offer but rejects it, saying it would be the biggest scam he's ever been part of. Ao Zi, annoyed by Wu's refusal, points out the millions Wu could make if he just played along. It's clear Ao Zi has done his homework on Wu, which infuriates him. Wu stands up and leaves, warning Ao Zi never to pry into his private life again. Annoyed by Wu's irritating attitude, Ao Zi orders his maids to handle him. Wu, who thought the maids were just pretty ladies, is shocked when they reveal their heavy-duty weapons. After a failed attempt with a bazooka, the maids chase Wu through the mansion. They corner him and prepare to finish him off with another rocket. Just as the rocket is about to hit, Leon bursts in and saves Wu. After fending off the maids, Leon asks Wu where his Geiger counter is. Wu sheepishly admits he lost it. Frustrated, Leon chases Wu in circles until the maids catch up and beat them both. Wu faints briefly, and Leon drags him to a hiding spot. The maids, armed with their bizarre weapons, search every corner of the room. During their hiding, Wu and Leon argue about violence. One of the maids finally tells Leon that, as an ombudsman, he shouldn't hurt humans like them. However, Leon realizes he can make an exception if he's helping a friend. After some awkward questions about their friendship, Leon is relieved when Wu calls him a friend. With that settled, Leon prepares to face the maids while Wu makes another attempt to escape. Leon, still in puppet form, endures a barrage of attacks from the 5 maids in their heavy-duty outfits. The maids challenge him to kill them if he dares, threatening him with the full force of the law. Despite his own reckless disregard for his life, Leon prepares to strike, determined to help Wu. Just in time, Wu arrives and stops Leon from making a grave mistake. As the maids continue their assault, Wu and Leon manage to dodge the attacks. Meanwhile, one of the maids reports back to Ao Zi about Leon's interference. Ao Zi, enraged, orders her to ensure both Wu and Leon are killed. Far away, on a mountain, a cowboy ombudsman is assigned a new mission. His target, Leon and his client, Wu, who have broken the rules and damaged their measurer. The cowboy ombudsman, a zombie-like figure hardened by his past kills, accepts the mission without hesitation. Wu and Leon are locked in a desperate battle against the maid mercenaries. With at least one door being smashed every minute, they have little choice but to stand their ground and fight. Armed with M4 carbines and RPGs, the maids are relentless. In a bid to buy themselves some time, Wu and Leon blow up a section of the ceiling, creating a makeshift barricade between them and their pursuers. As they regroup in their temporary safe spot, Wu and Leon trade insults. Leon mocks Wu for being naive enough to trust Ao Zi. Just then, they hear Ao Zi's smug voice over the phone. Peering through a pigeonhole, they see a live feed of Ao Zi gloating about their inevitable defeat and urging them to surrender. Leon, fed up with Ao Zi's arrogance, threatens him with the name of a feared ombudsman, Evan the Terrible, the number 11 strongest ombudsman. Evan is notorious for his ruthlessness and can destroy anyone with a valid reason. Meanwhile, the cowboy ombudsman, traveling to the city, encounters a pride of fierce lions. Curious, he bends down to admire the Lion King's mane. The king, eager to assert his dominance, challenges the cowboy. The battle is swift and brutal. The cowboy kicks the Lion King into the air, leaving him humiliated and subdued. To his surprise, the cowboy inadvertently wins over the female lions, while embarrassing the defeated king. The once proud lion now barks like a dog, thoroughly defeated. Eventually, the cowboy arrives at Ao Zi's mansion. He quickly overpowers the mansion's pathetic security detail, using his electrocuting powers, knocking them out one by one. Breaking into the mansion, he sets his sights on finding Leon and Wu. As the last line of defense falls, one of the survivors rushes to inform Ao Zi of the cowboy's intrusion. Ao Zi is initially baffled, wondering which army would dare attack his home. His confusion turns to shock when he learns that their attacker is just one person. At that moment, the cowboy, now dressed in full warrior gear, blows a massive hole in the mansion to access the inner building. The entire structure shakes from the force of his weapon, and Leon is terrified. It turns out, the cowboy is none other than Evan the Terrible, a figure Leon fears deeply. In a desperate move, Leon and Wu decide to propose a ceasefire with the bazooka-wielding maids to face this common threat. The maid squad, led by Aruba, is baffled by Leon's sudden shift. Leon convinces them that Evan poses a greater threat, and that once he's done with Ao Zi, they too will be in danger. Aruba, reflecting on Leon's words, realizes he's right. Leon connects with Aruba and her team on a personal level, sharing how tough a mercenary's life can be. Aruba reveals that she and her team were once destitute, and that Ao Zi's brother had given them a chance at a better life. Moved by this, the maids apologize and agree to join forces with Leon and Wu, heading to the exit to regroup. As they make their escape, Aruba and her team encounter Ao Zi lounging comfortably in his chair. He inquires about their departure, but Aruba, now resolute, announces that they're leaving for better opportunities. Ao Zi tries to blackmail them using a contract drawn up by his brother, Ao Ji, but Aruba is done with his arrogance. She delivers a harsh insult and lands a punch on his cheek before shooting the carpet and storming out. At the same time, the butler, finally fed up with Ao Zi's reign, resigns with tears streaming down his face. He acknowledges the end of the Ao Shi Empire and bids farewell, before allowing Evan to deal with Ao Zi. Evan, however, leaves Ao Zi's fate to the cleanup crew, who erase his memories and reduce him to a shell of his former self. Outside, Leon and Wu hide from the censors, who are busy cleaning up the mess. The censors are mindless humans tasked with erasing all traces of a crime scene. One censor spots Wu and begins to erase his memory. Just in time, Leon intervenes and saves Wu. Evan arrives shortly after and tells the censor to leave the matter to him. Wu, nervously trying to speak with the infamous Evan, finds that Evan is more interested in reprimanding Leon for his behavior. After a thorough beating, Evan finally listens to Wu's plea. Impressed by Wu's determination, Evan agrees to forgive them. However, before Leon can regain his status as a monitor, he must serve under Evan and stay under his watch constantly. Wu decides to stick with Leon and Evan, who welcome him back to the team. The trio receives their next mission, and Evan leads them to the site. Their task is to deal with a gang causing chaos in the city. Evan finds them lounging and drinking in an abandoned building. Instead of diving straight into action, Evan tries a different approach. He speaks to them politely and urges them to turn their lives around. As expected, the thugs don't take him seriously and only respond to violence. Evan shifts into action mode, delivering a serious beatdown to the gang. Wu, watching from a distance, worries about the thugs, but Leon reassures him that this is just how these guys learn. Once Evan finishes his work, he becomes the gang's new leader, and they vow to improve under his rule. By evening, Evan leaves with his new loyal followers, leaving Wu slightly uncomfortable seeing a bunch of burly men fawning over a slender cowboy. After their mission, Evan leads them to their next job. On the way, he shows them an electronic pamphlet introducing their new client, a kid named Keiki. Leon grumbles about the new assignment, but Evan warns him to be cautious. He reveals that Keiki is under the watch of two notorious twin monitors known as Life and Death. Meanwhile, the two twin monitors, an eerie, psychotic woman and her mute brother, receive the same pamphlet and realize they're on the same mission. Wu dreams about their next client, a boy named Keiki, in a bizarre scientific facility. Just as he's about to pass out in the dream, Wu calls out Keiki's name and wakes up moments later. Meanwhile, on the city streets, young Keiki is running around, desperately shouting for his parents. He's convinced they're finally coming home after being missing for 3 years, a belief that's never been true. That night, as rain pours heavily, Keiki sits outside a crepe shop, crying and questioning why his parents haven't returned. He's been told that if someone lies enough, eventually, the lie becomes true. Keiki has been lying so much that the system now sees him as a chronic liar and villain. Leon arrives to help Keiki. He uses his mysterious toy to blow some calming smoke at the distressed boy, which helps Keiki relax enough to share his story. Keiki explains that the last time he saw his parents, it was a normal night. They were heading out for some business and promised to return soon. Unfortunately, they never came back. Keiki recounts his painful experiences of being bullied and mocked by local kids for being abandoned. His resentment towards his parents grows, but he still clings to the hope that they will one day return. After hearing Keiki's story, Evan and his team understand the situation better. However, Keiki isn't pleased with them being there and demands they leave. Fortunately, his guardian, who comes up to the attic, finds them and invites them to dinner. Over the meal, she shares details about Keiki and his parents. Evan and his team pretend to be Keiki's friends, which makes the guardian happy, as she never thought Keiki would have any friends. Wu asks about Keiki's parents, and the guardian's face falls with sadness. Meanwhile, in a high-rise hospital building, the head of a rogue research facility meets with Life and Death, the infamous terrible twins. He's surprised to learn that Keiki's parents, whom he had experimented on 3 years ago, had a child. He hires the twins to find Keiki and bring him to them, with orders to eliminate anyone who stands in their way. The next morning, Wu, Keiki, Leon, and Evan head to a large hospital where Keiki's parents used to work, hoping to find them. Leon reflects on their recent clients and believes Keiki and Wu, both labeled as criminals, are victims of circumstances. Evan questions Leon's thoughts, and Leon speculates that they might be being distracted from a more significant threat. They set aside the discussion and enter the hospital, where Evan splits the team to search for the director separately. Wu pairs up with Keiki, while Evan and Leon search together. During their search, Wu and Keiki meet a janitor who recognizes Keiki. The janitor reminisces about old times and recalls that Keiki's parents had left something for him. He goes back to his office to retrieve it. Meanwhile, Leon and Evan encounter one of the terrible twins, Yuri, in the hospital. Leon recognizes her but chooses to stay silent. They follow her into a room, only to find themselves trapped with her and her twin brother. Evan gets injured in the ensuing confrontation and demands to know why Yuri is in the building with her brother. Yuri calmly tells them to abandon their mission, but that's not an option for Evan and Leon. She lifts her skirt to release clitoris bubbles, which she then enlarges and uses to trap them. While this is happening, the janitor who had earlier spoken with Wu and Keiki leads them to a bizarre building. There, he ambushes them. As Wu and Keiki are caught off guard, the battle between Evan, Leon, and the terrible twins rages on. The twins take their time between attacks, causing frustration. During the fight, Leon pauses and asks Yuri why she's aiding the villains. Yuri laughs softly and explains that they work with correcting murderers and have grown to despise humans after seeing their darkest sides. They've become accustomed to human cruelty and have devised a plan to provoke humans into more violence. When the meter indicates a human's inevitable doom, they revel in the betrayal on their faces. Yuri reveals that their current target is the hospital director, a notorious serial killer, and they're intent on watching him die. She warns Leon and Evan not to interfere, but Leon sees through her and demands she open the door. Despite his insistence, Yuri remains resolute, healing herself and continuing to fight. A few meters away from the locked room, Woo stops the janitor from attacking Keiki with a massive axe by tasing him to the ground. Woo quickly realizes the janitor is possessed by some mysterious force and has been acting under its control. As more monsters start coming after them, Woo dodges and fights his way through, hiding from the creatures in the alleys. During a brief pause, Woo notices surveillance cameras and realizes he's been detected. The fool then rushes to a blind spot to avoid being seen. Safe for the moment, Woo asks Keiki if he's ready to find the control room. Keiki, visibly terrified, asks if Woo thinks his parents could be like the monsters. Woo reassures him that his parents are fine. Keiki then asks Woo if he has parents who cook for him, and Woo sadly replies that he only has a younger brother left. Before they can continue, a monster catches up to Woo and knocks him out. When Woo wakes up, he finds himself face to face with the hospital director and his bizarre pink octopus parasite. Kike, desperate to see his parents, rushes to hug them, only to realize too late that they've been transformed into monsters. Tragically, Kike is stabbed in the chest and left to die. The director, with the parasite still on his head, explains to Woo that he's been living in the director's body for years after Woo had supposedly killed him. He mocks humans and supervisors for not knowing about him, revealing that he's built a massive army of parasites ready to take over the city. The director tries to win Woo over by complimenting his unique smell, but Woo, now hardened by the situation, throws a knife at the parasite's head, causing it to bleed green blood. After getting stabbed in the head, the pink octopus parasite crawls down the director's bald head and pins Woo to the ground. It starts slapping Woo, swearing to make his face look more ugly than his. Using its control over Keiki's parents, the parasite forces them to hold Woo down, while it continues to beat him mercilessly. Meanwhile, Evan, Leon, and the twins take a break from their fight when Evan is infected by Carrara's virus, causing a strange lump to appear on his cheek. Leon checks on him, and Evan says he's fine. However, Yuri reveals that there's no vaccine for the virus and insists they surrender so she can heal Evan. But Evan, sticking to his no-negotiation policy, changes his strategy and blasts Carrara to pieces. Shocked, Yuri searches for her brother but is met with Evan's plasma rays, which destroy her upper body. Yuri quickly revives, but Evan keeps shooting her to ensure she doesn't fully recover. As the fight intensifies, Evan fires his final blast, and Carrara, showing up at the last minute, takes the hit for his sister and dies. Back to Woo, the little octopus tortures him, trying to force some strange equipment into his mouth. Woo, recalling advice he once gave his elder brother, activates his inner strength and frees himself with a hidden knife. He turns the fight against the cowardly octopus, who, in a panic, sends minions to attack Woo. The battle continues as Woo fights for his survival. After taking the hit for his sister, Carrara transforms into a small protective animal. Infuriated by Evan's earlier mockery, Yuri merges with her twin brother, combining their powers. With Yuri controlling the motor limbs, they launch a coordinated attack against Evan. Despite Evan's relentless plasma bullets, Yuri continuously revives and keeps attacking. Leon, feeling useless and overwhelmed, is haunted by Mia's harsh words about his weakness compared to Evan. As he struggles with his self-doubt, Evan pulls him back to reality and helps him escape the crumbling building. Once outside, Evan returns to confront Yuri and her brother, giving Yuri a stern reminder of her mistakes. Yuri, with a swollen head, realizes that the director is being controlled by parasites and feels guilty for her previous failures. Determined to redeem her stupid self, Yuri helps Evan and Leon by destroying the virus inside them, allowing them to fight again. Once her brother is back to full strength, Yuri asks Evan for the plan. Evan explains that they need to lure all the parasites into a hidden location and eliminate them all at once. They also need to deal with the giant with the green aura that is causing chaos around the hospital. Yuri and Carrara head off to handle their part of the mission, leaving Evan and Leon behind. Evan tries to contact Woo but finds that the building's signal is blocked, leaving them unable to reach him. Inside the building, Woo discovers the signal blockage and doesn't let it get him down. Instead, he throws his knife at the parasite, irritating it so much that it merges with the dead director and transforms into a terrifying monster. As the number of parasites grows, Evan and his team, including Yuri and her brother, struggle to keep up. Evan, frustrated with the situation, dons his full battle gear and joins the fight. Leon, Yuri, and Carrara all get into the action, with Carrara summoning a colossal monster to aid them. Meanwhile, Woo evades the monstrous parasite while waiting for the right moment to strike. When he finally finds an opening, he traps the parasite with his light powers, effectively destroying it from the inside out. With the parasite defeated, the other parasites attacking Evan and Leon are also eliminated. Afterward, Carrara and Yuri part ways, while Evan goes to investigate the parasite source. Leon wants to join him, but is told to find Woo first. Remembering his negative thoughts from earlier, Leon shakes off the doubts and heads off. Just as Leon is about to search for Woo, Carrara and Yuri return, eager to fight him now that Evan is gone. Leon warns them of Evan's wrath, but they ignore him and prepare for battle. Just when things look grim, a mysterious figure appears and stabs the twins, changing the course of the fight. Before Leon resumes his battle, he reflects on just how arrogant and rebellious Yuri and her brother are. Fueled by his hatred for them, he's determined to rid the world of people like them. As he watches the siblings get their chests pierced, he searches for the mysterious intruder and discovers it's a colossal giant. Meanwhile, Wu awakens in the wreckage of the corridor, still disoriented. He notices a small movement on his right lap and finds a tiny version of the vile spawn he fought earlier. This spawn, now a harmless little Pookie with no limbs, is a result of Wu absorbing its powers. Pookie, seeing Wu as a giant, tries to flee, but Wu captures it and traps it in a jar, perplexed by his new sinister pet. Without a weapon, Pookie tries to manipulate Wu by claiming that the Matrix it once controlled will elect a new king, one much stronger than it was, who could potentially defeat other supervisors. As Pookie talks, Leon is outside facing the giant, the newly elected king of the vile spawns. The monstrous figure, oblivious to Leon's presence, taunts him and incites him to anger. Acting on his emotions, Leon launches a desperate attack on the giant, pushing himself to his limits. Wu hears the commotion and rushes to help his friend. Outside, Leon's efforts lead to his sacred orb breaking, and he's left vulnerable. The fat pig picks him up effortlessly and waits for any sign of resistance. Despite being belittled, Leon manages to stab the giant's eyes and escapes its grasp, determined to fight on. Just as the giant monster is about to retaliate, Yuri reappears with a vengeance, twisting his neck until it's completely turned around. Despite this, the red beast miraculously survives, baffled by how Yuri and her brother managed to come back. After finishing off the monster, Yuri thanks Leon for buying them the time they needed to revive. The monster, now with its head back in place, prepares for round 2 against Yuri, Karara, and Leon. Meanwhile, Wu, exhausted but determined, rushes toward the fight scene. Yuri, Karara, and Leon summon their correctional toys and launch an assault on the giant red beast. While the others engage in battle, Leon feels sidelined, watching the powerful heroes in action. He becomes envious of Yuri's strength and perfection, questioning the fairness of their powers. Mia's dark voice reappears, criticizing Leon for feeling like a mere tool for Yuri. Overwhelmed, Leon almost succumbs to Mia's negativity, but decides to fight the demons to buy time for his allies. Wu reaches the roof of a nearby building for a better view. There, Pookie, the tiny monster, boasts about the new king's immense regenerative powers, claiming he's nearly invincible. Unfazed, Wu puts Pookie down and dismisses his threats. Pookie, frightened, manages to escape the jar while Wu's back is turned. Meanwhile, Yuri completes extracting venom from her brother's body and plans to inject it into the giant monster, hoping to slow down its regeneration and give them a fighting chance. When Yuri is ready, she signals Leon, who injects the giant syringe of venom into the new king's shoulder. To ensure the venom takes effect, Yuri makes Leon's puppet hug the monster and explode. Despite their efforts, the beast doesn't fall. Just in time, Evan arrives and finishes off the monster with a well-placed shot. The battle is soon over, and Yuri gets most of the credit, leaving Leon feeling both sad and frustrated. Evan, ignoring the children, heads to a secluded alley for a private meeting with his superiors. He updates them on the recent mission and discusses the parasitic spawns that caused havoc. Leon, now back with Wu, reports that he's normal but expresses his concerns about Wu's special powers. The superiors remind Evan of his mission, and one tries to call him by his real name, but Evan scorns them, declaring he'll handle Wu himself if he finds out any connection to Mia. Meanwhile, Yuri uses her powers to help Keiki meet his parents one last time in the afterlife. In his vision, Keiki enjoys a crepe breakfast with his parents, who apologize for not being there for him. Keiki, tearfully, apologizes for being a difficult child. As his parents say their final goodbyes and fade away, Keiki vows to grow into someone they would be proud of. With Keiki's soul at peace, Evan continues his investigation. Before he leaves, Wu asks if his villain status can be lifted. Evan responds that someone will handle it for him. In the dark of the city, a llama and a human are scoping out a recent crime scene. After a sneeze from one of them sends germs flying, they dive into their work. Later that night, Pookie finally arrives at his master's lair. His master is furious with him for being reckless and exposing their existence to humans and supervisors. The plan was to stay hidden in the shadows, but Pookie's blunder has ruined everything. As punishment, the master decides that Pookie will be devoured by the other fearsome parasitic monsters. 2 weeks after the chaos at the hospital, Fife City is busy repairing and rebuilding. Despite the large number of people in the city, only a small fraction, about 372, are missing, a tiny percentage of the overall population. That night, as Wu Minglu heads back to his dorm, he stumbles upon the llama and his human partner, who are sprawled out in front of his room. The human is collapsed on the floor, begging for health points to avoid an embarrassing end. Wu, not in the mood to deal with this, rushes past them and opens his door. Inside, he finds Leon holding a baguette and scolding him to come inside and get comfortable. Wu, however, has brought a guest, Cannon, a blonde supervisor who Leon finds particularly particularly annoying. Cannon, known as Cowardice, introduces himself and explains his mission. Cannon, the number 13 supervisor, has a knack for dealing with spineless people. Tonight, he's here to help Paladin Coward, a man who Cannon believes is the greatest coward ever. Earlier, Cannon had tracked his client, who was being bullied by a trio of thugs with noses like hockey pucks. Cannon had made a dramatic entrance, berating the bullies for their cowardice and for existing in the first place. He then turned to Paladin and promised to help him build the courage he needed to stand up for himself in the future. Coward, still confused, asks Cannon to explain who he is and where he comes from. Cannon, making a dramatic entrance, tells him he's a number 13 supervisor here to help him build courage. He then uses powerful magic to boost Coward's bravery and strength with a flash of paparazzi-style golden lighting. Despite this, Coward's newfound courage quickly fades as one of the bullies knocks him out with a stick, leaving him lying on the ground. Cannon watches in frustration as the bullies continue to pummel Coward. After the bullies leave, Cannon reveals Coward's secrets, including his embarrassing habit of stalking a crush at the 10th Academy. Coward, humiliated and scared, asks how Cannon knows. Cannon summons his sacred animal, a llama, to demonstrate his knowledge. Before taking his dramatic leave, Cannon advises Coward to never give up on his dreams. Unfortunately, his heroic exit is cut short when he gets hit by a truck. The story of Cannon the Great ends with him begging Leon to help him get revenge on the bullies who mistreated him and his client. Wu recognizes Cannon as the person Evan mentioned who would help correct his villain status. When Wu asks Cannon how he plans to do this, Cannon pulls out a photo of himself with long Pinocchio-like hair and says he'll help Wu fix Coward's cowardice. Wu and Leon laugh nervously, finding it hard to believe Wu ever had long hair. Leon remembers a scenario where Wu had grown out his hair after telling a lie in front of everyone. In a flashback, Wu is seen rushing through the corridor, frantically trying to get his hair back to normal after angering Leon. Along the way, he passes Coward, who mistakenly thinks Wu is a girl and makes a fuss about it. It turns out the girl Coward has been obsessively stalking was actually Wu a few weeks ago. Realizing the mistake, Wu asks Cannon how he can make things right. Cannon, with a sinister smile, suggests Wu must dress up as a girl again and help Coward find his courage. Wu, not thrilled with the idea, rejects the offer. Cannon, knowing Wu's weakness, bribes him with a stack of 100 WAN notes. Seeing the money, Wu eagerly agrees and starts preparing for his unusual task. After getting new clothes, Wu dresses up as a cute girl and practices to stay in character for the next day. The following day, Wu meets Coward at his usual spot. Coward is stunned, his brain momentarily short-circuits. As he regains his composure, everything seems to go smoothly. Cannon and Leon, hiding nearby, watch the scene unfold. While Leon is disgusted by the plan, Cannon remains hopeful. The bullies soon arrive, expecting to humiliate Coward in front of his girlfriend. Cannon steps out and makes Leon invisible. He lets Coward talk tough to the bullies, and when the moment is right, Leon jumps in to defeat them. After the bullies are dealt with, Coward and his girlfriend, Wu, go to a nearby cafe for coffee and a chat. Leon and Cannon stay close by to ensure no surprises. At the cafe, Coward struggles to find words, but eventually thanks Wu for being there for him, making him feel seen and valued. Wu gives Coward a pep talk, encouraging him to be a good person and pursue meaningful goals. After saying their goodbyes, Wu and Leon head back home. As Wu and Leon head home, Wu asks why Cannon, unlike most supervisors, didn't have to stick to the 100-meter rule. Leon explains that level 4 supervisors like Cannon have special privileges and powers that let them bypass certain rules. Plus, Evan, Cannon's partner, has had to put up with Cannon's quirks for a while. They laugh about it until Monitor Chenru, Wu's least favorite school character, shows up. Seeing Wu in his girl's outfit, Chenru quickly turns away, throwing one of her flyers at him. Later that night, back home, Wu vents his frustration to Cannon about the embarrassing encounter. Cannon just laughs and advises Wu not to worry about others' opinions. As a parting gesture, Cannon gives Wu some of the money he owes him. Wu turns his back, but Cannon then notices one of Chenru's posters and reads about thugs with allotriophagy causing trouble. Leon and Wu, puzzled by the term thugs with allotriophagy from Chenru, ask Cannon to explain. Cannon begins his history lesson about Fife City. He explains that Fife City wasn't built in a day. It started as a barren land after a disaster, and survivors faced terrible famine. For decades, people starved, and some even resorted to eating human flesh to survive. This dark practice continued for 30 years until the city began to take shape and food storage improved. However, some people who had developed a taste for human flesh couldn't stop. These individuals, known as those with allotriophagia syndrome, would sneak out at night to prey on strays and anyone they could catch. The last known case ended when a policeman killed a patient who tried to eat his visiting daughter. Since then, the city has been peaceful, until now. Chenru's posters suggest these dangerous individuals might be active again. Wu teases Cannon about his age, and Cannon laughs, saying he'll always be 18 at heart. They all share a laugh before heading to bed. In a dim sewer tunnel, two shady guys find their way to an underground hideout. They're looking for their boss, whom they'd paid earlier for protection. The thugs at the base tell them the boss isn't around. Frustrated, the men start complaining until a half-bald man with a strange tattoo punches them, warning them to keep quiet or face worse. After dealing with them, he heads to his basement to enjoy some human flesh before retreating to his dark lair, grumbling about how much he hates the city and his desire to destroy it. The next morning, Cannon wakes Leon and takes him to a spot where they can watch Coward's school. They witness the same bullies they dealt with the previous day breaking into Coward's classroom, roughing up the teacher, and searching for Coward. Despite the chaos, Coward's classmates and teacher urge him to stay and wait for security, but Coward decides to face the bullies and their boss directly, thinking he can handle them. He steps outside and finds himself surrounded by 5 bullies. Undeterred, he raises his fist, ready to fight them. Coward's bravery turns out to be not enough as he's beaten mercilessly and tossed around like a rag doll. From their hiding spot, Leon feels sorry for him, but Cannon insists they let Coward fight his own battle this time. Coward's moment of truth is now. He must face his fears and stand up for himself. As he lies on the ground, he recalls everything he's learned about courage from Cannon and Wu. Determined not to give up, he defiantly tells the bullies he will never surrender. Annoyed, the bullies hit him harder, but thankfully, they don't kill him and eventually leave. Cannon and Leon come out of hiding to check on Coward, only to see a biker approaching with chains. The biker wraps the chains around Coward's neck and drags him away. Cannon and Leon immediately spring into action, chasing the biker through the city. Cannon manages to intercept the biker, knocking him off his bike before he can cause more harm. The biker reveals himself as the same person who'd been ranting about the city earlier, and then flees into an alley. With Coward's life hanging by a thread, Cannon and Leon rush him to the hospital. As Coward fights for his life in the intensive care unit, Cannon feels a deep sense of guilt. To make amends, he decides to use his abilities to heal Coward quickly by overdrawing on Coward's future life. After healing Coward, Cannon takes to the skies and soon tracks down the biker who tried to kill him. The biker, like every other useless thug, claims he wanted to teach Coward a permanent lesson to prevent him from being a hero in the future. The biker then transforms into a gigantic monster, abandoning his humanity to fight Cannon. Cannon, unfazed, hurls insults at the monster and slices open its chest. He then uses a demonic hand to hold the beast in place and interrogates it about its boss. With the information in hand, Cannon calls Evan to report on Dam, the biker's boss, who is immortal and can spread allotriophagia to his followers. Evan thanks Cannon and promises to send inspectors to deal with Dam. When Cannon inquires about Mia, Evan mentions he's investigating someone else, which Cannon deduces is Wu. Meanwhile, Chenru and a few bystanders watch the police sirens blare on the street. Chenru is too focused on pasting her awareness posters to notice much else. Wu, catching her off guard, admits he's been dressing up in zesty clothing and begs her to keep it a secret. In exchange, he offers to teach her how to avoid surveillance cameras. Chenru agrees and punches Wu out of reflex, but they're soon interrupted by a scream. They follow the sound and discover a monster feasting on a freshly dead body. When the monster is discovered, it lashes out and pulls both Chenru and Wu underground with it.